تخيلوا هذه المشاهد: اقتحام السفارة الأميركية في طهران، ودبلوماسيون تحولوا في لحظة إلى رهائن. ما حدث في عام 1979 لم يكن مجرد أزمة عابرة، بل بداية قصة طويلة لم تغلق فصولها. من هناك بدأت الحكاية، حكاية علاقة عالقة بين واشنطن وطهران، تتبدل فيها الأحداث لكن لا يتبدل جوهرها. ضيفي اليوم كان هناك، لم يقرأ القصة في الكتب بل عاشها من الداخل. جون ليمبرت دبلوماسي أميركي سابق، وأحد الذين وجدوا أنفسهم في قلب تلك اللحظة المفصلية بعد أكثر من 4 عقود، وفي وقت يعود فيه التوتر إلى الواجهة وتطرح فيه المفاوضات كما لو كانت اختبار قوة. نطرح السؤال: هل تغير شيء فعلاً؟ أم أن القصة لم تفهم منذ البداية؟ من أزمة الرهائن إلى الاتفاق النووي، من الفرص الضائعة إلى الأخطاء المتكررة، إلى حاضر مفتوح على كل الاحتمالات. هذا الحوار ليس قراءة في الماضي، بل تفكيك هادئ لأخطاء قديمة ما زلنا نرى نتائجها حتى اليوم. أهلاً بكم. إذا معنا من نيويورك جون ليمبرت، أهلا وسهلا بك. دعني أبدأ من مسألة الفرص الضائعة بين واشنطن وطهران التي أشرت إليها في التقديم. من وجهة نظرك، هل كانت هناك لحظة حقيقية كان يمكن أن تذهب فيه الأمور بشكل مختلف؟
That's a good question. There were many missed opportunities on both sides. Back in 1999, when Secretary of State Albright spoke about a roadmap to better relations, she spoke about the events of 1953. One of the first officials to do so. The Iranians didn't really take her up on that. They didn't follow up, which if you speak to many, very frankly, they'll say that was a mistake. In 2003, the Iranians offered, by way of the Swiss, they offered basically to say, we'll put all issues on the table and talk about them. And the Bush administration, for whatever reason, said, no, we're not interested in talking. In 2009, 2010, President Obama showed very clearly he was interested in something different with Iran, but it took the Iranians 4 years to respond to that. And then it took another 2 or 3 years to negotiate the nuclear agreement. But that agreement, and it may not have been perfect agreement, but no negotiated agreement is ever perfect. It showed there's a different way of interacting. Not that we're going to be friends, but that at least we can talk to each other, and perhaps we could have avoided the tragedy that's happening today.
كيف تقيم طبيعة المفاوضات الجارية؟
I don't know, but what I see, at least on the American side, it's not really what I would call a negotiation. I mean, it was interesting when they asked Vice President Vance why in the first round in Islamabad, why it failed. He said, well, they didn't accept our terms. Well, that's not a negotiation. That's giving an ultimatum and saying you must accept everything we want, or there's no agreement. Negotiation is finding out what the other side wants, what you want, and how you can both achieve. The other part is, and this was, I think, perhaps a mistake by both sides, is they put on the table proposals that were clearly unacceptable, to the other side. And in negotiation, if you want to negotiate everything, missiles, sanctions, nuclear programs, support for other regimes, and so forth, you're going to agree on nothing. And what allowed the negotiators for 2013, 2014 to agree on the nuclear agreement is this: that's all we're going to talk. We're going to talk about one thing. The Iranians wanted relief from sanctions. The United States wanted to put restrictions on Iran's nuclear program. It seems to me they could still come up with something like that. They could call it JCPOA 2.0. And President, who is obsessed with his predecessor, with Obama, could say, oh, well, you see, Obama negotiated a terrible deal, but I negotiated a better one. Essentially be the same thing.
هل تعتقد أن الأوروبيين غائبون تماماً عن هذا الملف؟
This is not the Europeans right there. As far as I know, there was no consultation. There was no attempt at cooperation or coordination. So I think the Europeans are simply saying, you broke it, you fix it. Don't come to us to try to fix the mess that you made. And the other point I would make is one reason that the negotiations for the nuclear agreement in 2000 succeeded in 2015, 2016 was because much more than the United States was involved. On the Western European side, it was Germany, France, and Britain, and also China and Russia. So Iran was negotiating not just with one country, but with six, and it made a difference. Made for a much stronger negotiating position.
إذا عدنا إلى عام 1979 كنت شاهداً وحاضراً في واحدة من أكثر اللحظات حساسية في تاريخ العلاقات بين البلدين، وهي أزمة الرهائن. عندما تعود إلى تلك التجربة اليوم، كيف غيرت فهمك لإيران؟ ليس فقط سياسياً بل اجتماعياً أيضاً.
A number of ways. Let me put it this way. My connections to Iran go back a long way. They go back about 60 years. I would say 98% of my interaction has been very good and very positive. People have been very kind to me. I married into a wonderful Iranian-American family. I have children who are half Iranian. So it's been a very positive experience. That was a year and 2 months, and that was negative. That was not good, but it happened. It happens. I've learned, I suppose, how if you're going to deal with Iran, you're going to be wrong a lot, especially if you attempt to predict what's going to happen. For example, I did not predict that the monarchy would fall, that what replaced the monarchy would be worse. When the people attacked the embassy in November of 79, I thought, okay, this is like a student sit-in from the 1970s. They'll read their demands, they'll make a statement, and then the adults in the room, if you like, the authorities on both sides will say, okay, that's good, now please leave. That's what I thought. A week, a day, 24 hours, 2 days, maybe 3 days, maybe. But that was it. What I certainly did not predict that we would be there for a year. And I didn't predict that this incident, among others, would be such a festering sore on our relationship, so that 47 years later, it still festers. I don't think the Iranians have ever come to terms with it in terms of what they did. They did enormous damage to themselves. I mean, what happened to us was difficult, it was bad, it was scary, and all the rest. But what it did to Iran was 100 times worse. But I didn't think that 47 years later, we would still be so hostile.
جون، دعنا نتحدث عن مسألة الثقة. هناك مستوى عميق من انعدام الثقة بين الطرفين. في رأيك إلى أي حد تصنع هذه التوترات عبر السياسات، وإلى أي حد تغذيها السرديات والتاريخ المشترك؟
It's a good question. I think a lot of the mistrust is created by the failure to talk to each other. You assume the worst about them. They obviously have some evil purpose. They want to cheat us. We can't trust them. And not talking over 47 years, that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. You assume the worst. And if you watched and listened to the debates over the nuclear agreement in 2015, 2016, in Washington and in Tehran, they were the same. It was the same. They were the same debates. Both sides were saying, the opponents of the agreement were saying, oh, it's a terrible agreement because you can't trust them. They are evil. They are dishonest. They are trying to cheat us, and therefore you cannot trust. And it was the same argument. Didn't matter whether it was in Washington or Tehran. So you have, I guess we call it, in English, we call this mirror imaging. And just when we seem to be able to break that cycle back in 2015, 2016, after the agreement, and officials were talking to each other, lower level people were talking to each other in a very professional way. Of course, then circumstances changed, and nobody expected a president to come along, trashed the agreement, not that he knew what was in it, not that he cared what was in it. All he cared about was that it was associated with Obama.
أعتقد أن الولايات المتحدة تدرك أن إيران لاعب أساسي في عدة صراعات في الشرق الأوسط. كيف تقرأ استراتيجية واشنطن؟ هل هي دفاعية، أيديولوجية، أم براغماتية ربما؟
That's a good question. You ask very good questions all the time.
Thank you.
Very difficult. None of them have simple answers.
I know some questions just don't have answers.
I mean, to be very frank, if there is a strategy, if president has a strategy, I don't know what it is, because his goal seems to change day to day, hour to hour. I mean, if you have a strategy, that means you have a goal you want to achieve. You say, oh, this is what we want to do. This is why, and how. This is how we're going to do it. And either we achieve all of it, or part of it, or none of it. But that's what we do. We can measure how well we do. But here there is no strategy. There is no strategy. Basically, his approach is, well, I said we were going to replace this brutal dictatorial regime with something better for the Iranian people. Well, no, I didn't mean that. That's not what my goal. My goal was to eliminate, to stop their support of overseas groups. Well, no, that didn't happen either. Our goal was to stop them from launching missiles against their neighbor, against Kuwait or the Emirates or their neighbors, or drones. No, that's not our goal. This is what I call the Marxist approach, and by Marxist I mean Groucho Marx. Groucho Marx, the comedian, who once famously said, "I have principles. If you don't like my principles, I have other principles." So that seems to be his approach. Well, you don't like this goal, I have other goals. But I don't see I don't see a strategy. And of course, if you don't have a strategy, then you don't consider the consequences of your action.
عند الحديث عن استراتيجيات لا يمكن تجاهل الأخطاء أيضاً. ما هو أكبر خطأ متكرر في التعامل مع إيران؟ هل هو سوء فهم أم سوء تقدير؟
It is all of the above and probably more. I mean, look, there have been mistakes on both sides. On the Iranians, let's look at the Iranian side for a second. Why have, for 47 years, they have been marching around screaming, death to America, death to Israel, talking about wiping Israel off the map, eliminating it, and so forth and so on. These slogans, frankly, are stale. You know, if they were in the supermarket, they would go rotten. They would have gone rotten. They're meaningless. But they've kept them up. And there were some very, smart people in the Islamic Republic who knew that. I mean, President Khatami, when he was president, he knew that. He said this is pointless. These kinds of slogans, but they kept saying them. And the problem is, if you keep saying death to so and so, that so and so, that side is going to react eventually, and they did. So that was on the Iranians. On the American side, there was this obsession with not looking weak. The driving force in our policy, and I saw this when I was in the government, not what do we want to do, what do we want to accomplish, how can we get a more productive relationship, but we can't look weak. And so simple initiatives that might have changed the dynamic and might have avoided today's tragedy were dismissed. Things like cooperating about anti-drug work, anti-narcotics work in Afghanistan, for example, or having a military-to-military hotline to avoid conflicts, to avoid mistakes. I remember people raising these, talking about these, and the response was, well, yes, maybe that's a good idea, but we can't. But if we do that, we risk looking weak. And that has been persistent through one administration after another, Democratic administrations, Republican administration. And it was even very strong in the Obama administration, where President Obama explicitly said he wanted to change the relation. He wanted to change the relationship. But that banter was like a chain around people's necks. They couldn't escape it.
لننتقل مرة أخرى إلى اللحظة الراهنة. في ظل كل هذا التوتر، هل ترى مساراً واقعياً لخفض التصعيد بين الولايات المتحدة وإيران؟
First of all, this cycle has been very hard to break. It's lasted 47 years. And as I said, I didn't think it would. I didn't predict. I mean, look at our relations with other countries that we have problems with, the Soviet Union. We reestablished relations with the Soviet Union after less than 20 years. We weren't friendly necessarily, but we reestablished relations. China, 49, 39, about 30 years. It took about 30 years to reestablish relations. Cuba, we've reestablished relations. North Korea, even, we came very close in 1999 when Secretary Albright visited North Korea. Vietnam. I mean, how many hundreds of thousands of people were killed, Vietnamese and Americans, in that awful war? And now we seem, I don't know if we're friends, but we have very productive relations with Vietnam. Why can't we do it with Iran? That's a tough question. That's a tough question. I mean, in diplomacy, Hafsa, you never give up. You keep at it. And if you fail once, then you go back and you try again. If the big door is shut, you look for the little door. I mean, You just keep at you just keep at it. But diplomacy is slow. It can be frustrating. It takes the ability to listen. It takes persistence. It takes empathy. And I don't see any of those things in our current administration. I mean, the Iranians have their own problems, but in our administration, I don't see any of those characteristics that you associate with diplomacy. So there must be a road back, but it's hard to see.
جون، سؤالي الأخير: لو طلب منك اليوم تقديم نصيحة للجيل الجديد من الدبلوماسيين الذين سيتعاملون مع إيران في المستقبل، ما هو الأمر الأساسي الذي يجب ألا يستهينوا به؟
Well, first of all, I'm glad you didn't ask me what advice I would give to this administration, because this administration is not listening to my advice, or God knows whose advice they're listening to, but it wasn't hard to tell them, don't do this. Your predecessors didn't do it for damn good reason. They didn't do it. They didn't, and there were reasons they didn't do it. You know, learn something from your predecessors. But your predecessors, both Republican and Democrat, didn't do it. But this administration seems to have this idea that we can do things that other people wouldn't do. Well, there's a reason they didn't do, because they were stupid. They were stupid things to do, and they didn't do them. I mean, even George Bush, not known for his mental ability, backed off on attacking Iraq, which many people thought he would do. Take the tools of diplomacy, patience, being careful with words. Obama understood this very well. Words matter in diplomacy. I mean, words are your weapon in diplomacy. Be careful of your words. Be very careful about predictions, because that's a trap. It was a trap for me, as I mentioned earlier. I've been wrong so many times. So many times. And history matters. People have memories of things. They may be right, the right memory, they may be the wrong memory. But the history matters. So, for example, when President Carter admitted the Shah to the United States in 1979 and essentially abandoned us to what happened, did anyone remind him of what happened in 1953 and how, with the return of the Shah, with the United States arranging the Shah's return? The Shah had again left the country, and we and the British arranged a coup to bring him back. Did anyone did anyone in the room know this history? Did anyone in the room know the importance of this history? So know the history. This is not profound. This is not hard. This is not hard. And again, have lots of patience.
من تلك الصور التي بدأت بها القصة إلى واقعنا الحالي، تغيرت الوجوه والتصريحات، لكن الصراع ربما لم يتغير كثيراً. إيران ليست مجرد ملف سياسي، بل معادلة معقدة بين التاريخ والهوية والقوة. وفي حديث جون ليمبرت، لا تظهر الأزمة كصدام مفاجئ، بل كمسار طويل من الفرص التي ضاعت والحوارات التي لم تكتمل. واليوم ربما لم يعد فهم إيران خياراً، بل ضرورة، والخطأ في قراءتها قد يكون مكلفاً. أشكركم على المتابعة. إلى اللقاء.